Her foot slapped the center
You
mat
think you
while
can
she
stop
pointed
me?
straight at me. Easy money, the white female black
not
belt
letting you
said,
take him.
loud enough for every kid in the gym to hear. Her assistant pulled my daughter's enrollment folder from my hand and tossed it onto the front desk. Inside that folder was my volunteer badge for the after-school tournament safety gate. If that gate stayed locked during drills, 80 children would have only one exit. The room went quiet for half a second. Then the phones came up. Blue mats covered the floor from wall to wall. Fluorescent lights hummed above us. The air smelled like rubber, sweat, lemon disinfectant, and the sweet bubblegum my daughter had been chewing since school pickup. Olivia Brooks stood barefoot at the center of her studio. Black belt tied tight. White jacket spotless. Camera light glowing red behind her. She smiled like she had already won. That was her mistake. My daughter Ava stood beside me with her backpack hugged to her chest. She was 9 years old, small for her age, and braver than she knew. She had asked for karate lessons because a boy at school kept taking her lunch seat. I had not come there to fight. I had come there to help her feel safe. Olivia looked me up and down. Work boots. Faded jacket. Plain gray shirt. A father who had come straight from a maintenance shift and still had dust on his sleeves. She saw all of that. She did not see my hands. Parents sign the waiver, sit down, and stay out of the way, she said. I reached for the folder. I need that badge before the safety drill starts. Her assistant smirked. The drill can wait. A few teenagers laughed from the edge of the mat. One of them whispered something into his phone while recording. The red camera light behind Olivia stayed steady. This was content to her. Not a family. Not a child. Not a room full of students trusting adults to know better. Ava touched my sleeve. Dad, can we leave? I looked down at her. Her eyes were shiny, but she did not cry. She was watching my face the way children do when they are deciding whether the world is still steady. We will, I said quietly. After I get our folder back. Olivia stepped closer. Or you can earn it. The studio changed around that sentence. The parents near the benches leaned forward. The older coach by the trophy wall stopped tying a student's belt. A boy near the water fountain lowered his phone, just a little. Something in the air tightened. Olivia rolled her shoulders and nodded toward the mat. One clean touch, she said. You step in, I tag you, you admit you were wasting everyone's time. I looked at the children lined along the wall. Then I looked at the locked safety gate near the back hallway. Its red indicator light was still blinking. The drill timer on the wall read 7 minutes. I took one slow breath. I am not here to entertain your camera, I said. Her smile thinned. That sounds like fear. Ava's fingers curled around my sleeve. The older coach by the trophy stared at my stance now. Not at my face. Not at my clothes. My feet. His expression changed before anyone else noticed. Olivia clapped her hands once. The sharp sound bounced off the mirrors. Come on, she said. Show your daughter what courage looks like. I handed Ava my keys and stepped onto the edge of the mat. The gate light kept blinking behind her. I stepped onto the blue mat and stopped just inside the white boundary line. The rubber surface felt firm beneath my boots. Every conversation around the room faded into a low murmur. Only the steady hum of the ceiling lights and the faint buzz of the recording camera remained. Olivia folded her arms and smiled with complete confidence. She believed she had already won before either of us moved. I kept my hands relaxed at my sides. Ava stood near the front desk holding my keys against her backpack. She tried to smile at me, but I saw the worry behind it. The enrollment folder still rested beside Olivia's assistant. My volunteer badge stuck halfway out of the pocket. The red light above the emergency safety gate continued flashing across the room. 6 minutes remained before the drill. Take your jacket off, Olivia said. You will want both arms free. I shook my head. I am not here to compete. She laughed softly. Then why are you standing on my mat? Because my daughter deserves her enrollment papers back. Several parents exchanged quiet looks. One father slowly lowered the coffee cup in his hand. A little boy sitting cross-legged near the mirror leaned closer with wide eyes. The older coach never looked away from my feet. His forehead tightened slightly. He noticed something that everyone else missed. Olivia rolled her neck once and bounced lightly on the balls of her feet. Her movements were smooth and practiced. She had spent years building speed, balance, and confidence. The students admired her. That much was obvious. "One touch," she repeated. "That is all this takes," I answered calmly. "Then let us keep it that simple." Her assistant raised the phone higher. "This is going to get thousands of views." A few teenagers laughed again. The sound echoed against the mirrors before disappearing into another heavy silence. Ava quietly called my name. "Dad?" I looked over my shoulder. "Everything is all right." She nodded because she trusted me, not because she understood the room. That trust mattered more than anything else. Olivia slowly stepped closer until only a few feet separated us. "You still have time to walk away." "I walked in for my daughter," I said. "I will walk out with her." The older coach finally spoke. His voice was low but clear. "Olivia." She glanced toward him without turning her head. "What?" "Slow down." She smiled without looking at him. "I have this." He remained silent after that, but his expression did not change. Something continued bothering him. The wall clock clicked forward another minute. 5 minutes remained before the safety drill. I glanced briefly toward the blinking gate light. Olivia caught the movement. "Distracted already? Someone has to think about the children." Her smile faded for the first time. "Only a little." "That is exactly what I am doing." I did not argue. There was no point. The students lined both sides of the mat now. Even parents who had been filling out paperwork stepped closer. The studio smelled stronger now. Sweat. Fresh floor cleaner. Cotton uniforms. Someone nearby had opened a bottle of orange sports drink. Outside, rain tapped softly against the front windows. Olivia raised one open hand. "Ready?" I did not. "Lift mine." "You do not need to prove anything to me." "Maybe not," she answered. "But I can prove something to everyone else." The older coach slowly exhaled. His eyes moved from my stance to my shoulders, then back to my feet again. Recognition flickered across his face, but he kept it to himself. Then Olivia took her first step forward. Olivia closed the distance with quick, balanced steps. Her movement was sharp. Controlled. Years of practice showed in every shift of her weight. I stayed where I was. My boots never left the mat. The room became so quiet that I could hear the air conditioner cycling above us. Ava held her breath near the front desk. I saw it from the corner of my eye. The older coach folded his arms across his chest. He was no longer watching Olivia. He was watching me. That detail mattered. Olivia stopped just outside arm's reach. "You still have not taken your jacket off," she said. "I do not need to." She smiled again. "Confidence without skill usually ends badly," I answered with the same calm voice. "Maybe." Her students chuckled behind her. Someone whispered that I looked scared. Another phone appeared above the crowd. More cameras pointed toward the mat. Olivia slowly raised one open hand. "Just touch hands and we begin." I looked at her hand but did not move. "Return my daughter's folder first." Her assistant leaned against the front desk and shook her head. "After you lose." Ava stepped forward before I could stop her. "That folder belongs to my dad." Her voice was small, but every person heard it. Olivia glanced toward her without changing expression. "Sweetheart, your father accepted the challenge. He came to sign me up," Ava answered quietly. "Not to fight." A few parents shifted uncomfortably. One mother looked down at her own son and gently lowered his phone. The older coach finally walked closer to the edge of the mat. "Olivia," he said, "give the child the paperwork." She sighed. "Coach Harris, this will take 30 seconds. He did not answer. His eyes remained fixed on my posture. Rain continued tapping against the front windows. The blinking red light above the safety gate flashed again. 4 minutes remained until the scheduled drill. I checked the clock without turning my head. Olivia noticed. You really are worried about that gate. Children use that exit. They have another one. Not during today's drill. She frowned for the first time. How would you know? Because I helped inspect it yesterday. That answer earned another silence. Her assistant laughed to break the tension. He fixes doors now. I ignored him. Ava hugged her backpack tighter. The enrollment folder was still only a few feet away from her, but it might as well have been across the city. Olivia slowly circled to her left. Testing angles. Watching my eyes. I watched her shoulders instead. Coach Harris noticed that too. His expression tightened another step. What did you learn to stand like that? He asked suddenly. Several students turned toward him. I looked at the coach. Long ago. Olivia smiled as if the answer proved nothing. Everybody has a story. Some stories stay quiet, I replied. The wall clock clicked again. 3 minutes remained. A soft alarm sounded somewhere behind the office door. One of the reception workers looked toward the blinking safety gate with growing concern. She reached for the office phone but hesitated. Olivia waved her off without looking. Not now. The receptionist slowly lowered her hand. Coach Harris did not. He walked another step forward until he stood beside the boundary line. His eyes settled on an old scar across my knuckles. Then they moved to the way I carried my weight. Recognition flickered across his face like a light switching on. He whispered something under his breath that nobody else seemed to catch. Then he looked directly at Olivia with unexpected concern. Coach Harris took one more step toward the mat. His voice stayed low, but every word carried across the room. Olivia, end this now. She looked at him with polite disbelief. You have never stopped one of my demonstrations before. This is different. She smiled again. Because he has a good stance? He did not answer immediately. His silence lasted longer than anyone expected. The students glanced back and forth between them. Even the phones lowered a little. I remained where I was. My hands stayed open. My breathing stayed slow. Ava watched every second from beside the front desk. The blinking red light above the safety gate reflected faintly across the polished floor. 3 minutes remained. Olivia shifted her weight forward. Coach, I appreciate the concern, but I know exactly what I am doing. He finally looked directly at her. That is what worries me. The room became quiet again. The air smelled of clean mats, fresh cotton uniforms, and the coffee one parent had forgotten on the bench. Outside, rain continued tapping softly against the windows. Olivia rolled one shoulder and faced me again. Last chance. Return the folder. Earn it. Her assistant laughed under his breath. He keeps asking for paperwork because he knows he cannot keep up. A few teenagers smiled, but the laughter sounded uncertain now. Something inside the room had changed. Nobody could explain it yet. They simply felt it. Ava spoke again. Dad? I turned my head just enough to see her. Yes? You said strong people protect others. That is right. Please do not let anybody get hurt. I smiled gently. I will do everything I can. Coach Harris closed his eyes for one brief second. When he opened them again, he looked older than before. He had spent decades teaching discipline. He recognized restraint when he saw it. Olivia mistook it for hesitation. She lifted one hand and motioned for the cameras to keep recording. Everyone watches, she said confidently. This is what confidence looks like. I answered quietly. Confidence does not need an audience. The words settled over the room without force, yet several parents lowered their phones completely. The receptionist looked once more toward the flashing safety gate. The alarm inside the office chirped again. This time it sounded louder. She looked at Coach Harris for permission. He gave a small nod. She hurried into the office. Olivia frowned. The drill can wait. Coach Harris shook his head. Safety never waits. She ignored him. Her attention returned to me. Touch hands. I slowly raised one open hand. Not in challenge. Not in aggression. Simply in acknowledgement. She reached toward it. The instant our hands met, Coach Harris inhaled sharply. His eyes fixed on my grip, my balance, and the relaxed position of my shoulders. Recognition spread across his face with complete certainty. He whispered only 2 words. Military training. Nobody else heard him. Olivia certainly did not. She released my hand and stepped backward into position. Ready? She asked. Whenever you decide respect matters more than pride, I answered. Her expression hardened. Around us, the students straightened their uniforms. Parents stood shoulder to shoulder along the wall. The room no longer felt like a children's karate class. It felt like everyone was waiting for a lesson they had not expected to receive. Then the front door opened, and an unfamiliar man stopped the moment he saw me. The man who had just entered stopped beside the doorway with a gym bag hanging from one shoulder. Rainwater dripped from his jacket onto the entrance mat. He looked across the room, past the students, past the parents, and then directly at me. His expression changed in an instant. Marcus? He said. I turned toward him. It took me a second to recognize the face beneath the gray beard and the baseball cap. Ryan? He smiled with quiet surprise. I knew it was you. Olivia glanced between us. Do you know each other? Ryan nodded without taking his eyes off me. A long time ago. Coach Harris watched carefully. He noticed the way Ryan stood the moment he entered. It was the same quiet balance he had been studying in me. Ryan stepped closer but stopped outside the mat. He looked at Ava first. You must be his daughter. Ava smiled politely and nodded. Yes, sir. Ryan smiled back. You look just like your father around the eyes. Olivia folded her arms. If this is a reunion, it can wait. Ryan finally looked toward her. What is happening? Before I answered, one of the teenagers spoke excitedly. She challenged him. He keeps refusing to fight. Ryan's smile disappeared. He looked back at me. You refused? Several times. Ryan slowly exhaled. That sounds about right. Olivia tilted her head. You make it sound like that means something. Ryan studied her for a moment before speaking. It usually does. The room settled into another uneasy silence. The blinking red light above the safety gate flashed again across the polished floor. 2 minutes remained before the scheduled drill. The receptionist stepped out of the office carrying a clipboard. Coach Harris, she said softly. The safety coordinator has not checked in yet. I raised one hand. That would be me. Several heads turned at once. The receptionist looked relieved. We still need your badge before we can unlock the emergency route. My enrollment folder remained on the front desk beside Olivia's assistant. The volunteer badge was still inside. Ryan noticed it immediately. Why is his badge over there? Nobody answered. Olivia looked toward the folder for the first time since our conversation began. Her assistant shifted uncomfortably. Coach Harris spoke before anyone else could. The badge should have been returned already. Olivia remained silent. She had started to realize the morning had moved beyond a simple challenge. Ryan looked back at me. You are coordinating the evacuation drill? Only the gate assignment. He nodded slowly. Children first. Always. Ava looked from Ryan to me with quiet curiosity. She had never heard anyone speak to me like an old teammate. Ryan smiled gently at her. Your father always put other people ahead of himself. Olivia heard that sentence. Something in her expression softened, if only slightly. She looked at me again, this time with more questions than certainty. The assistant quietly picked up the enrollment folder but hesitated before bringing it over. The phones around the room remained raised, yet nobody seemed interested in recording a victory anymore. They were waiting for answers instead. Ryan looked down at my hands and noticed the faded scars across my knuckles. His eyes narrowed with recognition before he looked back up. He was about to say something that would change the room completely. Ryan looked at me for another second before lowering his voice. "Tell me you are not actually going through with this." I smiled faintly. "I have been trying not to." Several parents exchanged puzzled looks. Olivia folded her arms again. "If you know him, then you know he accepted the challenge." Ryan slowly shook his head. "No. I know Marcus." He glanced around the room before continuing. "He only steps onto a mat when someone leaves him no better choice." The studio fell quiet again. Even the teenagers holding their phones stopped whispering. Coach Harris moved beside Ryan. "You recognized him too?" Ryan nodded once. "The way he stands. The way he watches the room before looking at the person in front of him." Coach Harris let out a slow breath. "I thought so." Olivia looked from one man to the other. "You are talking like he is some kind of legend." I answered before either of them could. "I am a father who came to register his daughter." Ava smiled when she heard that. She understood those words better than anyone else. Ryan looked at her, then back at me. "And you have never forgotten what matters." The blinking light above the safety gate flashed again. 1 minute remained before the evacuation drill. The receptionist hurried across the lobby carrying the enrollment folder at last. She handed it directly to me. "I am sorry for the delay," she said quietly. I opened the folder and removed my volunteer badge. The laminated card caught the overhead lights as I clipped it onto my jacket. The receptionist looked relieved. "We can unlock the gate now." "Please do," I answered. She nodded and disappeared down the hallway. Olivia watched the exchange without speaking. The confidence she carried only minutes earlier had begun giving way to uncertainty. "You really were coordinating the safety drill?" she said softly. "Yes." "For all the children?" "Every child in the building." Nobody laughed this time. Ryan looked around the room. "You all thought he came here looking for attention." He smiled gently. "Marcus avoids attention whenever he can." I shook my head. "That part has not changed." Coach Harris studied me for another moment. "Where did you learn that level of discipline?" I looked toward the floor for a brief second. "Different chapter of my life." Ryan rubbed the back of his neck. He knew exactly which chapter one meant. Olivia took one careful step closer. "You still have not answered the challenge." "Because there should not be one." She looked down at the blue mat beneath her feet. "I wanted to prove something." "To who?" I asked. She hesitated. The answer did not come as quickly anymore. Around us, the students waited in complete silence. The air smelled of clean uniforms, fresh rubber, and rain drifting in each time the front door opened. Then the hallway alarm sounded. A soft electronic tone echoed through the building. The receptionist called from the corridor. "Safety gate unlocked. Drill ready?" Parents instinctively gathered near their children. Students lined up exactly as they had practiced. I stepped toward the hallway instead of toward Olivia. She looked surprised. "Where are you going?" "To do the job I promised the children I would do." Coach Harris nodded with quiet respect. Ryan smiled to himself. Ava hurried over and slipped her hand into mine. As we walked toward the hallway, Olivia remained standing alone at the center of the mat, watching everything she thought she understood begin to change. The hallway filled with quiet footsteps as students formed neat lines beside the wall. The electronic chime repeated every few seconds. Teachers counted heads. Parents moved closer to their children. Ava stayed beside me with one hand wrapped around my fingers. The volunteer badge rested against my jacket as I walked toward the emergency gate. The red indicator light had turned green. The heavy latch clicked open with a smooth metallic sound. Fresh air drifted inside, carrying the scent of rain and wet grass. "Exit is clear," I called. The receptionist nodded and wrote something on her clipboard. One class at a time stepped through the doorway. Small sneakers squeaked across the polished floor. Children laughed quietly, believing it was only another routine drill. That was exactly how it should feel. Coach Harris watched the line move outside without interruption. Good spacing, he said to one instructor. Keep the younger students together. The instructors repeated the directions with calm voices. No one rushed. No one pushed. Olivia stood near the edge of the mat, no longer the center of attention. She watched the orderly flow toward the open gate. The cameras that had been raised only minutes earlier were now pointed at the children completing the drill. Her assistant lowered his phone completely. Ryan walked beside me as the last group entered the hallway. Still volunteering whenever a school calls? He asked. I smiled. Some jobs matter because nobody notices them. He nodded slowly. You always believed that. Ava looked up at Ryan. Did you know my dad before me? Ryan smiled warmly. A long time before you were born. She tilted her head with innocent curiosity. Was he always this quiet? Ryan laughed softly. Even quieter. Coach Harris overheard the conversation while checking the attendance list. His eyes moved from Ryan to me again. You served together? Ryan looked at me first, silently asking permission. I gave the smallest nod. Yes, he answered. For several years. Olivia heard those words from across the hallway. Her expression tightened with uncertainty. Military? She asked. Ryan answered carefully. A long time ago. He offered nothing more. I appreciated that. The outdoor assembly area slowly filled with students standing beneath a covered pavilion behind the gym. Rain tapped gently against the metal roof. Teachers called roll. Every child answered. The routine finished exactly on schedule. The receptionist looked relieved. All students accounted for. I signed the volunteer checklist and handed back the clipboard. Everything looks good. She smiled. Thank you for coming early today. Olivia watched me sign the form. She had expected trophies, applause, or arguments. Instead, she saw paperwork, responsibility, and children leaving safely. The contrast stayed with her. Coach Harris folded the completed attendance sheet. That is the real lesson, he said quietly. Several parents heard him. One father approached me after gathering his son. Thank you for helping with the drill. I shook his hand. Glad to help. Another mother smiled at Ava. Your father takes good care of people. Ava looked proud without saying a word. Ryan rested one hand on my shoulder. Marcus, I think the truth is going to come out today whether you want it to or not. I looked across the pavilion toward Olivia. She stood alone beneath the gray sky, watching every conversation unfold. Then Coach Harris walked directly toward her with a question she could not ignore. Coach Harris stopped in front of Olivia and waited until the last group of children reached the covered assembly area. Rain tapped softly on the metal roof above us. The sound blended with quiet conversations and the distant rumble of traffic. Olivia folded her arms, but the confidence she had carried all morning was fading. What is it? She asked. Coach Harris looked back toward me before answering. Who did you think you challenged today? She frowned. A father who refused to spar. He shook his head gently. No. A father who refused to embarrass you. Those words lingered in the cool air. Ryan stood beside me without speaking. Ava held my hand while watching the instructors finish the attendance count. One teacher smiled as the final student answered roll. The clipboard closed with a soft snap. The drill had ended exactly as planned. Coach Harris continued in a calm voice. I have taught martial arts for more than 30 years. Balance tells the truth before words do. Discipline tells the truth before action does. Olivia glanced toward me again. You recognize something? The moment he stepped onto the mat. Ryan nodded quietly. So did I. Several parents who had remained nearby listened without interrupting. The teenagers who had been recording earlier slowly lowered their phones. Nobody seemed interested in a viral clip anymore. They wanted to understand the man they had judged too quickly. Olivia took a slow breath. Then tell me what I missed. Ryan looked at me first. I gave the smallest nod. He turned back to her. Years ago, Marcus served on teams where staying calm protected lives. He paused for a moment. He never talks about it because that was never the point. Coach Harris added softly. His posture, his awareness, and the way he watched every child before looking at you told me enough. Olivia remained silent. The rain eased until only a light drizzle remained. Sunlight began pushing through the clouds beyond the parking lot. Ava looked up at me. Dad, they are talking about your old job. I smiled gently. It is an old chapter. Ryan's expression warmed. One that earned respect without asking for it. A father standing nearby slowly removed his baseball cap. Thank you for your service, he said quietly. I nodded once. Thank you? Another parent looked at Olivia, then back at me. No one spoke. The silence carried more weight than any argument. Olivia looked down at the blue mat visible through the open gym doors. I thought strength meant proving I was better than someone else. Coach Harris answered without hesitation. Real strength begins when proving something is no longer necessary. She closed her eyes for a brief moment. When she opened them again, the certainty that had driven her challenge was gone. In its place was honest reflection. Ava tugged lightly on my sleeve. Can we finish signing up now? I looked toward the front desk inside the gym. The enrollment folder still rested there, waiting to become what it should have been from the beginning. Olivia followed my gaze and quietly turned toward the entrance. She seemed ready to make a different choice. We walked back inside the gym after the drill ended. The familiar smell of clean mats and fresh floor polish greeted us again. Water dripped from jackets near the entrance. The bright overhead lights reflected across the blue training floor. Everything looked the same. Yet the room felt completely different. Olivia walked ahead of us without saying a word. She stopped beside the front desk and picked up Ava's enrollment folder with both hands. She looked at it for a long moment before turning toward us. This should never have left your hands, she said quietly. She walked across the room and offered the folder directly to Ava instead of to me. Ava accepted it carefully. Thank you, she whispered. Olivia nodded. You are welcome. The exchange lasted only a few seconds, but every parent watching understood what it meant. Ryan leaned against the wall with his arms folded. Coach Harris remained beside him. Neither man interrupted the silence. Some moments deserved to stand on their own. Ava opened the folder and checked the volunteer badge still clipped inside. She smiled with visible relief before handing it back to me. I fastened it onto my jacket once again. Everything is here, I said. Olivia lowered her eyes briefly. It should have been from the beginning. Her assistant stood quietly behind the desk. The confidence that had filled his face earlier had disappeared. He looked toward me before speaking. I should not have taken the folder. No, I answered calmly. You should not have. He nodded once. I am sorry. I accepted the apology with a small nod. There was nothing else to add. Coach Harris stepped closer to the front desk and rested one hand on the enrollment forms. This school teaches discipline before technique, he said. Today we almost forgot that. Several instructors standing nearby lowered their heads in agreement. Olivia took a slow breath. I forgot it first. The students listened quietly from the edge of the mat. Earlier they had expected entertainment. Now they were watching accountability. The lesson had changed completely. Ryan glanced toward me with a faint smile. You never needed to prove anything. Neither does anyone else, I replied. Ava looked up at Olivia. Can I still learn here? The question surprised everyone. Olivia blinked twice before answering. Only if I can promise you something first. Ava waited patiently. You will always be treated with respect in this school. Ava looked at me. I smiled gently. That is a good place to start. Coach Harris reached for a registration form and placed it neatly on the counter. I would be honored to help teach her. Olivia looked at him with gratitude. So would I, if they are willing to give me another chance. I did not answer immediately. I watched Ava studying the photographs on the wall showing students of every age earning belts together. She deserved instructors who valued character as much as skill. People earn second chances through what they do next, I said quietly. Olivia nodded. Then I will start today. She removed the camera that had been recording all morning from its tripod and switched it off without hesitation. The red recording light disappeared. Nobody complained. Nobody asked for another demonstration. The room no longer needed one. Then Ryan reached into his wallet and unfolded an old identification card that had not seen daylight in years. Ryan held the old identification card between two fingers before placing it gently on the front desk. The plastic had faded with time. The photograph was younger. The corners were worn smooth from years of being carried. Olivia looked down at it without touching it. Her eyes moved slowly across the printed words. Then she looked back at me. You never told anyone, she said quietly. I shook my head. There was never a reason. Ryan smiled faintly. That was always his answer. Coach Harris picked up the card for only a moment before handing it back to Ryan with quiet respect. I thought I recognized the discipline, he said. I just did not know where it came from. The students standing nearby exchanged curious looks, but none of them stepped closer. Whatever questions they had could wait. Ava tugged lightly on my sleeve. Dad, is that from your old job? I looked down at her. Yes. Was it important? I smiled. It taught me to protect people. She nodded as though that explained everything she needed to know. Children often understood the heart of something long before adults did. Olivia rested both hands on the front desk. I built this school because I wanted people to become stronger. She paused before continuing. Somewhere along the way, I started confusing strength with winning. Nobody interrupted her. The rain outside had almost stopped. Thin sunlight filtered through the front windows and stretched across the blue mats in long golden lines. The room felt warmer than it had that morning. Coach Harris spoke quietly. Every instructor reaches that crossroads sooner or later. Olivia looked toward him. Did you? He smiled. Many years ago. Someone older and wiser corrected me before I became the wrong kind of teacher. She lowered her eyes for a moment. I wish someone had corrected me sooner. Ryan folded the identification card and slipped it carefully back into his wallet. Sometimes the lesson arrives exactly when it should. I looked around the gym. Parents were gathering their children. Instructors stacked training pads against the wall. The excitement from earlier had disappeared, replaced by ordinary conversation. That ordinary feeling was comforting. It meant the morning could finally move forward. Olivia turned toward the assistant who had taken Ava's folder. Please delete every recording from today. He hesitated for only a second before unlocking his phone. All of them? Every one. He nodded and began removing the videos without complaint. The teenagers who had recorded earlier quietly did the same after seeing him. One by one, screens went dark. Coach Harris watched with quiet approval. Sometimes the strongest choice leaves no audience. Ava smiled when she heard that. Dad says good people help even when nobody claps. Several parents looked at me with warm expressions. I felt my face grow slightly warm, but I simply shrugged. She listens better than I do. Gentle laughter moved through the room. It was the first easy laughter of the day. Olivia walked toward Ava and stopped at a respectful distance. Would you still like to join our beginner class? Ava looked at me before answering. I gave a small nod. She looked back at Olivia. Yes. I would like that. Relief softened Olivia's face. Then I promise your first lesson will begin the right way. Coach Harris reached for the class schedule and placed it beside the enrollment form. Before anyone signed the first page, the front door opened once more, and an unexpected visitor stepped inside carrying a familiar navy blue jacket. The man carrying the navy blue jacket paused just inside the doorway and smiled the moment he saw me. Rainwater glistened across the shoulders of the jacket as he brushed it lightly with one hand. Marcus, he said warmly, I thought I might still catch you. I recognized him immediately. Chief Reynolds. He walked over and offered the jacket to me. You left this at the community center after the Veterans Mentoring event last week. I accepted it with a quiet smile. Thank you. I wondered where it had gone. Ava looked at the embroidered patch on the sleeve. Dad, that is your favorite jacket. It is, I answered. Chief Reynolds smiled at her. Your father wore that jacket every time he volunteered with young families. Olivia watched the exchange carefully. You know him too? Chief Reynolds nodded. For many years. Coach Harris extended his hand. I am Daniel Harris. Thomas Reynolds? The older man replied. It is good to meet you. Ryan chuckled softly. Looks like the whole world keeps finding Marcus today. I laughed under my breath. That would not be my first choice. The room relaxed with gentle smiles. Parents continued gathering their children, but many stayed close enough to listen. No one interrupted. Chief Reynolds rested one hand on the back of a nearby chair. Marcus never talks about himself, he said. So I will only tell you one thing. He looked toward Olivia. Every time we asked him to speak about leadership, he talked about serving others instead. Olivia lowered her eyes. I judged him before I heard a single word. Chief Reynolds answered kindly. Then today can become the day you stop doing that. Ava slipped her hand into mine again. Dad always says people deserve a chance to become better. Olivia looked at her with quiet gratitude. Your father has taught me more in one morning than I expected to learn all year. Coach Harris nodded slowly. The best lessons are rarely planned. Ryan leaned against the wall with an easy smile. And they usually arrive without trophies. A few students overheard him and smiled. The mood inside the gym had become calm and welcoming. The tension that filled the room earlier had disappeared completely. Olivia turned toward the students waiting near the mat. Everyone, before we begin afternoon classes, I need to say something. The conversation stopped. She stood in the center of the floor where she had challenged me only a short time before. Martial arts begins with respect, she said. Today I forgot that. I made assumptions about someone I did not know. That was my mistake, not his. The students listened in complete silence. Several parents nodded quietly. Olivia continued. From today forward, nobody who walks through these doors will be judged by appearance, clothing, occupation, or background. They will be treated with equal respect from the first hello. Coach Harris smiled with visible pride. Ryan folded his arms and looked at me. That sounds like the school you hoped your daughter would find. I looked at Ava. She smiled back at me without saying a word. Sometimes a child's smile answered every question. Olivia stepped toward us and stopped at a respectful distance. Marcus, thank you for choosing patience when you had every reason not to. I nodded once. Children remember what adults model. She took a slow breath and looked around the gym one more time. Then she quietly picked up the class roster and wrote Ava's name on the first line. The first thing Ava noticed was the empty space beside her name on the class roster. She looked up at Olivia with a hopeful smile. Does that mean I really get to start next week? Olivia returned the smile, gentler than any expression she had worn that morning. If you still want to, the first place in the class is yours. Ava nodded without hesitation. I do. Coach Harris placed the roster back on the front desk and carefully straightened the stack of enrollment forms beside it. This simple gesture seemed to reset the room. Parents gathered their children. Instructors rolled practice mats into neat rows. The familiar rhythm of the gym slowly returned. Rain had stopped completely. Bright afternoon light spilled through the front windows and reflected across the polished floor. Ryan zipped his gym bag and looked at me. You always had a way of turning difficult mornings into useful ones. I smiled quietly. Only when people are willing to learn. Chief Reynolds adjusted the collar of his jacket and glanced around the room. That willingness is rare. Olivia heard him and took a slow breath. Then I intend to protect it here. Coach Harris folded his arms with quiet satisfaction. That starts with us. Olivia nodded. Every instructor will begin next week's classes with a reminder that respect comes before rank, skill, or confidence. One of the younger instructors stepped forward. I think the students need to hear that from all of us. They will, Olivia answered. Several parents smiled in agreement. One father looked toward his son and said softly, "Remember this day." The boy nodded without taking his eyes off the training floor. Ava slipped her enrollment folder into her backpack with great care. She treated it like something valuable, not because of the paper inside, but because of everything that had happened around it. She looked at Olivia again. "Can I ask you something?" "Of course." "Will everybody be welcome the first time now?" Olivia answered without hesitation. "Yes." "That promise begins today." Ava seemed satisfied. She reached for my hand again. The warmth of her small fingers reminded me why I had stayed calm from the beginning. Chief Reynolds noticed the look on my face. "Still thinking about the children first?" "Always." Ryan laughed softly. "Some habits never change." Coach Harris walked toward the center of the mat where the challenge had almost begun. He bowed once toward the empty training space. It was a quiet tradition, one that honored discipline more than victory. Olivia joined him a moment later. She bowed as well, then turned toward me. "Marcus, I cannot change how this morning began." "No," I said gently. "But you can decide how tomorrow begins." She smiled with genuine gratitude. "I intend to." The last few parents waved goodbye as they left through the front door. Sunlight filled the entrance where gray clouds had stood only hours earlier. The gym felt lighter. Not because anything extraordinary had happened on the mat, but because something ordinary had returned. Respect. Ava tugged lightly on my sleeve. "Dad, can we come a little early for my first class?" I looked around the quiet gym one last time before answering. "I think that would be a good idea." Olivia picked up the class schedule and wrote one final note beneath Ava's name before carefully closing the folder. Olivia closed the enrollment folder with both hands and placed it carefully into Ava's backpack. She treated it with the same respect she should have shown from the beginning. Ava smiled and adjusted the straps on her shoulders. They looked a little too large for her, but she stood a little taller than she had that morning. Coach Harris switched off the overhead lights above the main mat, leaving only the warm afternoon sunlight pouring through the front windows. The blue floor no longer looked like a place where someone needed to prove anything. It looked like a classroom again. Parents offered quiet goodbyes as they walked toward the parking lot with their children. A few stopped to shake my hand. Others simply nodded with sincere respect. No speeches followed. No applause filled the room. Ordinary kindness was enough. Ryan picked up his gym bag and smiled. "I think this place found its lesson today." Chief Reynolds nodded in agreement. "And the lesson had nothing to do with winning." Coach Harris looked around the nearly empty gym. "The strongest schools are built one decision at a time." Olivia folded the class roster and placed it inside a cabinet near the front desk. Before closing the door, she paused. She reached up and removed the small sign that read challenge board from the wall beside it. She carried it to the storage room without saying a word. When she returned, the wall stood empty. It looked better that way. Ava noticed first. "Where did the sign go?" Olivia smiled gently. "I think we need a different one." She picked up a blank sheet of paper, wrote a few careful words, and placed it where everyone entering the gym would see it. "Welcome. Respect begins here." Coach Harris read the sign and quietly nodded. "Leave that one up." Olivia looked at me. "Thank you for giving me the chance to choose differently." I slipped my volunteer badge into my jacket pocket. "The choice was always yours." She lowered her eyes for a brief moment before looking back up. "I understand that now." Ava reached into her backpack and pulled out a small notebook decorated with bright blue stars. She tore out one page, folded it in half, and handed it to Olivia. "This is for your office." Olivia opened the paper carefully. Inside, Ava had drawn 3 simple figures standing together on a blue mat. Above them she had written, "Strong people help people." Olivia smiled through quiet emotion and held the drawing close to her chest. I will keep this where I can see it every day. We walked toward the front door together. Outside, the rain had washed the sidewalks clean. Sunlight reflected across small puddles, and children laughed as they climbed into waiting cars. The air smelled fresh. The neighborhood sounded peaceful again. Ava slipped her hand into mine. Dad, did anybody win today? I looked back once through the open doorway. Olivia was welcoming another family with the same calm smile she had offered us before we left. Coach Harris stood beside her. The new sign rested above the entrance. I smiled at Ava. The children did. She nodded as if that was the only answer that ever mattered. We walked down the sidewalk